A young guard on night duty at the Tower of London encountered a ghost that had been chained up for 500 years. This spirit could only find peace if someone of royal blood set it free. My name is Marcus Reed, and I had only been working at the Tower of London for 3 weeks. 24 years old, a history graduate from the University of Edinburgh, and I had never seen such a terrifying place in my life. The tower, which seemed colorful and lively during the day, filled with tourists, transformed into a completely different place at night. It was as if the pain of centuries came to life after darkness fell. When people think of the Tower of London, they usually think of the crown jewels, or the famous beefeaters, perhaps the ravens. But the true tower lies beneath its opulent facade, its horrific past. For 1,000 years, torture, executions, and imprisonment have taken place here. From Anne Boleyn to Guy Fawkes, historical figures have breathed their last breaths here. And some are still here. I was assigned to night duty at the Bloody Tower. It was one of the oldest and darkest sections. The stories the guides told tourists were nothing compared to what really happened here. This tower was particularly famous for the story of the little princes. Edward V and his brother Richard were brought here in 1483 and were never seen again. 2 children, aged 12 and 9, heirs to the royal throne, had vanished in a single night. In my first days on the job, Jim Hartwick, a veteran guard with 30 years of experience, had warned me. Jim was a reliable man with gray hair who spoke with a thick Yorkshire accent. He had told me what to watch out for when I was alone on night shifts. But his warnings were not ordinary security warnings. "The first nights are the hardest," he had said to me, sipping his tea, "until the tower gets to know you, and you get to know the tower. The tower is a very old place, Marcus. Very old and very bloody. The things that happened here, the people who died here, some of them refused to leave." His eyes were serious. "If you hear strange sounds after midnight, don't worry. That's normal. But if someone speaks to you, don't answer. Never." At the time, I thought these were just jokes told to scare new employees. The paranoia created by old buildings, the fantasies brought on by the loneliness of the night shift. I would learn how wrong I was that first night. My shift started at 11 p.m. The Tower of London was closed to the public at night, with only us and the advanced security systems present. Every hour, we had to follow specific routes and mark checkpoints. Starting from the top floors of the Bloody Tower, I had to descend to the lower floor and then move on to the Wakefield Tower. It seemed like a routine task. The nighttime atmosphere of the tower was completely different from daytime. The sounds of tourists, guides' explanations, children's laughter, all had vanished. All that remained was silence, the whispers of ancient stones, and the distant sound of the Thames. The walls seemed to breathe. The blood and pain they had absorbed over the centuries were being released into the darkness of the night. I completed my first tour. The light from the lantern filtered through the narrow staircase, illuminating the details of the ancient stonework. These walls, dating back to the Norman period, had witnessed countless royal dramas. Every corner, every room told a story. Anne Boleyn's final nights, Thomas More's thoughts, Guy Fawkes's tortures, they were all here, carved into the stones. The Bloody Tower was particularly terrifying. It was known as the place where the little princes disappeared. But the real story was more complicated. Edward V had ascended the throne at the age of 12, but his uncle Richard had other plans. The two children had been brought to the tower for protection, but protection soon turned into imprisonment, and then they vanished. Official history could never explain how they died. Some blamed Richard III, others Henry Tudor. Some argued they died of natural causes, but the truth was hidden here within these walls. My second shift began at midnight. The tower was completely silent now. From afar, I could hear the Thames, the occasional sound of passing cars, and the wind rattling the old wooden window frames. Other than that, there was nothing, or so I thought. As I climbed the stairs of the bloody tower, the echo of my footsteps on the stone reverberated in my ears. These stairs were very old. They had been trodden on for centuries. Kings, queens, prisoners, executioners, everyone's footsteps seemed to be etched into the stone. When I reached the third floor, I heard that sound for the first time. At first, I thought it was the sound of rats. There were many rats in the tower, so this was normal. But when I listened closely, I realized it wasn't the sound of rats. It was a much more metallic sound. It was like the sound of chains, metal striking metal, making a faint clinking sound. I remembered Jim's words, "If you hear strange sounds, don't worry." I continued, but the sound didn't stop. On the contrary, it became more distinct with every step I took. And something else had been added to the sound. It was very faint, almost inaudible, but it was there. The sound of someone crying. I stopped. I turned the flashlight toward the direction of the sound. There was nothing to be seen, just old stone walls, narrow windows, and empty corridors. But the sound continued. The clinking of chains and crying. A child's cry. My heart began to race. I reminded myself that this was my first night on the job. Stress, fatigue, adjusting to a new environment. These were normal things. They happened to everyone. But the sound was so clear that I was sure it was real. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing down the hallway. "Is anyone there?" The sound suddenly stopped. Complete silence. It was as if someone had flipped a switch. This was even stranger. If it had been a mouse, the sound would have faded gradually, but this had stopped instantly. I waited for a few minutes. I turned the flashlight's beam into every corner. There was nothing. Empty corridors, old walls, and the silence of the night. Maybe it really was a mouse. Or maybe it was just the sounds of the old building. That's normal in places like this. But as I was going downstairs, I heard slow footsteps behind me. Someone walking barefoot on the stone. Their steps were in sync with mine. When I stopped, they stopped. When I walked, they walked. I turned around. There was no one there. I was alone in the corridor, the lantern light illuminating the narrow space, but the footsteps, I had definitely heard them. They were very clear, very real. "Hello!" I called out again, this time louder. My voice echoed off the old walls. "Security, show yourself!"
There was no response, but in the dark corner where the light from the flashlight didn't reach, I saw a movement. It was very fast, as if a shadow had slipped away. It was human-shaped, but its proportions seemed wrong. It was very small, child-sized. I called the central security room. "Control, this is Marcus. Is there any other personnel in the bloody tower?" Jim's voice came through my headset. "Negative, Marcus. You're the only one there tonight." Is there a problem? No, I was just, checking. First night? Yes. I heard Jim's understanding laugh. Normal, Marcus. It happens to everyone on their first night. The tower is an old place, very old. Sounds echo, shadows play tricks. You'll get used to it. All right, Jim. Thanks. Let me know if there's any trouble. I turned off the radio. Jim was right. First night jitters, new environment stress, these were normal things. But as I continued downstairs, I couldn't shake that strange feeling. The feeling of being watched. When I went down to the 4th floor, I saw that room. It was a small, square room. The door was open, and it was dark inside. Tour guides referred to this room as the Little Prince's Room. It was where Edward V and his brother Richard spent their last days, or so it was said. I turned the lantern's light toward the interior. The room was empty. Just old stone walls, a small window, and the worn wooden floor. But there was something on the walls. Scratches carved into the stone. I had seen them before, on tourist tours, but now, in the lantern's light at midnight, they looked different, deeper, more deliberate. I approached. The scratches were not random. There were words. Very old, almost faded, but still legible. They looked like Latin. And numbers. Dates. The most prominent one, 1483. Hic Jacet Edwardus Rex Angliae. My knowledge of Latin was limited, but I recognized the words Edward and Rex, king, and 1483, the year the little princes disappeared. Could this inscription be from the days when they vanished? The room was very cold. It was cold outside too, but this was different, a bone-chilling kind of cold. My breath came out in steam, and there was an odd smell in the air. Old, musty, but also something else. Familiar, yet indescribable. As I scanned the walls with the flashlight, I saw other writings, smaller, more hidden places, as if children had played there. Scratched letters, scribbled drawings, and among them, written very small, one word. Ricardus. Richard. The younger brother, the one who went missing at the age of 9. At that moment I felt a movement behind me. I turned around but saw nothing, but I felt it. Someone was there. They weren't visible, but they were there. Very close. "Who's there?" I whispered. There was no answer, but the room grew even colder. My breath began to form thicker clouds of steam, and the chain sound had returned, but this time it was closer. It was inside the room. I turned the lantern's light to every corner. There was nothing there, but the sound continued, the clinking of chains and the crying, a child's cry. And this time there were words too, very faint, almost inaudible. "Where am I? Where is Mommy? It's so dark." A human voice, a child's voice, very sad, very scared. I felt my voice tremble. Who's speaking? The sound stopped. Complete silence. But the atmosphere in the room had changed. It felt electrified. My hair stood on end on my arms. My eyes began to tear up. And then I saw it. In the corner of the room, where the light from the lantern barely reached, there was a shadow. But this was no ordinary shadow. It had a shape, a human shape, a small, human shape. A child. As I got closer, the shadow became clearer. But it wasn't really a shadow, it was a transparent figure. It was emitting a blue light around it, and slowly,
Very slowly, it was moving towards me. I took a step back. This couldn't be real. I must be hallucinating. I'd watched too many horror movies, heard too many ghost stories. The first night jitters were confusing me. This isn't real, I told myself. This can't be real. But the figure kept approaching, and now I could see its face. A child's face, maybe 12 years old. It wore noble clothing, but it was pale, almost colorless. Its eyes were very sad, and it was very tired, as if it hadn't slept in centuries. When the child began to speak, I felt his voice coming from both very close and very far away. It was as if he was speaking on the radio, but at the same time, he was right next to my ear. "Don't be afraid," he said. "I won't hurt you." I couldn't speak. My throat was dry. I could hear my heartbeat. It was fast and irregular. Who are you?" I finally managed to ask. "Edward," said the child. "Prince Edward. And I've been here for a very long time." Edward from the Little Prince. But that wasn't possible. He had died 500 years ago. Or disappeared. Either way, he couldn't be here. "This isn't real," I said again. "You're dead. You can't be real." Edward smiled sadly. "I'm very real. I've been very real for 500 years. I had to lean against the wall. My knees were giving way. But how? Why?" "Because there is injustice," said Edward, approaching the window. He was looking at the Thames, but I wasn't sure if he could see it. "Because the truth never came out." "What truth?" "How we died, who killed us, why we were killed, and where we were buried." I tried to sit down, but there was no chair in the room. I sat against the wall. My legs were shaking. "What happened to you? What really happened?" Edward's expression grew even sadder. "Our uncle killed us, Richard III, for the throne. I was ahead of him in line for the throne. So was my brother Richard. He had to get rid of us. These were things I had read in history books, but it was a theory, not a proven fact. Are you sure? Maybe there's another—" "I'm very sure," said Edward, his voice hardening, "because I was there. Because I lived through it." The room grew cold again. The blue light around Edward grew brighter. The intensity of the light changed with his mood. "That night," said Edward, his eyes distant, "my Uncle Richard came. He had his men with him. He told us we were going to play a game, a night game, but it wasn't a game." His voice was filled with sorrow. 500 years of pain had seeped into his voice. "They separated me from Richard, my younger brother. He was only 9 years old. He was terrified. He cried. He called out to me, but I couldn't protect him." "What happened then?" "They kept me here, in this room, for days. They didn't give me food. They didn't give me water. If you want to be king, you must learn to endure pain," they said. Edward's voice trembled. "But I was already king. I became king when my father died." "What happened to your brother?" "They took him somewhere else, to Wakefield Tower. I could hear his voice sometimes, his crying, his calling for me, but I couldn't reach him."
Edward stood in front of the window. The moonlight illuminated his figure, making his transparency even more apparent. Then one night, he said, I didn't hear his voice. I didn't hear any sound, and I knew my brother had gone to the other world. How did you die? Edward turned to me. His eyes were tearful. From hunger, from thirst. It was a very slow death, very painful, but the most painful thing was that I couldn't protect my brother. Silence fell between us. The wind was battering the windows. In the distance, the sound of a siren could be heard, the sound of the modern world. Why are you still here? I asked. Because justice hasn't been served, because no one knows the truth. Richard III is portrayed as a villain in history books, but our murders have never been proven.
Edward continued his story. There was 500 years of weariness in his voice, but also a glimmer of hope. It was as if he hadn't spoken to anyone in a very long time. After they killed me that night, he said, my Uncle Richard acted very cleverly. He hid our bodies. In the official records, we were listed as missing. No one knew what had happened to us. Where did he bury your bodies? Under the tower. There are very old secret rooms here, from Roman times. Richard knew those places well. I read that bones were found in 1674. Edward smiled bitterly. Those bones weren't ours. They were other children's bones. It was part of Richard's plan. He left fake evidence. Our real bodies are somewhere else. Where? Very deep. In the foundations of the tower. In places no one can find. Edward began to pace the room. His feet didn't seem to touch the ground. It was as if you were floating in the air. I've been waiting for 500 years, he said, for justice, for the truth to come out, but no one looked, no one cared. What about your brother? Is he here too? Edward's expression changed. He looked even sadder. No, Richard is long gone. He found peace because he was more innocent. He was younger. He didn't hold a grudge. He didn't harbor hatred. But I was king. I had responsibilities. I had to protect my people, uphold justice, and I failed. That's why I stayed here. The light around Edward was blazing. The intensity of his emotions was creating energy. But do you have hope now? I asked. Yes, he said, a sparkle appearing in his eyes. Because you can see me, because you can talk to me. This is the first time. The first time? No one has seen me in 500 years. No one has heard me. I was very lonely, Marcus. Very, very lonely. It was hard to bear this emotional burden. A child, alone, for 500 years. No one to talk to, no one to share with. So, what happens now? I need help to reveal the truth, Edward said. And you are special, Marcus. How am I special? Because this isn't a coincidence. You came here because fate sent you. Only the right person can see me. Only someone with a pure heart. This compliment embarrassed me. I'm just a regular security guard. No, Edward said firmly. You're much more than that. And I want to show you something. Edward started to leave the room. He gestured for me to follow him. I hesitated. I had a duty. I had to stand guard.
Marcus, said Edward, Your real mission now was to find me. This is no coincidence. It's fate. We walked down the corridor, Edward in front, I behind. In the light of the lantern, I could see his faint glow. Sometimes it passed through the walls, sometimes it returned to normal. The laws of physics applied to him differently. "Edward," I said as we walked, "what do I need to do to uncover the truth?" "We need evidence, modern evidence, DNA tests, radiocarbon dating. I can't do those things, but you can." "How will I do that? I'm just—" "You're not alone," Edward said, smiling at me. "Help will come." "From whom?" "The royal family." I was surprised. "The royal family? Why would they help?" "Because they also love justice, especially Harry." "Prince Harry?" "Yes, he's different. He's on the side of the helpless, his mother's son. Diana, the people's princess, on the side of the helpless and the oppressed." "But how will we reach Harry?" Edward smiled mysteriously. "He'll find us." Edward took me to the lowest level of the Bloody Tower. This area was closed to tourists. There were narrow, damp corridors and old cells. Some of the cells were so small that it was difficult to even stand inside them. Traces of medieval torture were visible everywhere. "This place is very old," said Edward, touching the walls. "It's from the original foundations of the tower. It's even older than the Norman period. There are Roman remains here." Indeed, some parts of the walls were made with different stonework. They looked rougher, more ancient. They could have been from the Londinium period. Edward stopped in front of a particular wall. "Here," he said, "there are secret passages behind this wall, very old, very deep. My Uncle Richard used to use them." I looked at the wall. It looked like an ordinary stone wall. "How do you open it?" "There's a special mechanism, but it's very difficult and dangerous. If you step in the wrong place, the traps activate." "Traps?" "Yes. These secret passages were only meant for emergencies, enemy attacks, sieges. Back then, the tower's security was of vital importance." Edward pointed to certain stones in the wall. "These stones move. If you step on them in the right order, the door opens, but the wrong order, death traps."
"Did you use these secret passages?" "No," said Edward with a sad expression. "I was killed before I had a chance to learn. But my Uncle Richard used them often. I saw him carrying our bodies out of there." "You saw him? How?" "As a spirit. After my death, my spirit couldn't leave my body, and I watched what he did." Edward continued his story. His tone was very serious, very painful. "That night, after they killed me, my Uncle Richard came with 2 men. They took my body. They took it to the secret passages. They buried it very deep where no one could find it." "Your brother Richard too?" "They had taken him away earlier. I couldn't see where his body was buried, but I think it's in the same area." We stood in front of the wall where the secret passages were for a long time. What Edward was telling us was horrific, but also very detailed. He remembered everything as if it had happened yesterday. "Marcus," said Edward, "if we can open these secret passages, we can find our bodies, and we can confirm our identities with DNA tests." But I can't do this alone. We need official permits, a team. I know. That's why we need Harry's help.
Why would Harry come here? Edward smiled mysteriously. Because I am going to enter his dreams. His dreams. Souls have power. We can enter the dreams of people who are related by blood. Harry has Plantagenet blood in his lineage. Distant, but it's there. This was very strange, but Edward's very presence was strange. I was now living in a world where normal physical laws no longer applied. Will this work? It will, because Harry is a good person. He loves justice and protects the helpless. He is his mother's son. That night, Edward and I talked a lot. He told me about the old days, royal life, his childhood. He was a very intelligent child. If he hadn't been killed, he would have been a good king. Marcus, will you keep talking to me? Of course, Edward. Why not? Because people are afraid of ghosts. They run away. I won't run away. You're a harmless child. You just want justice. Tears glistened in Edward's eyes. No one has spoken to me for this long in 500 years. You're not alone anymore. Thank you, Marcus. You're a true friend.
Edward didn't show up for the next few days. He said he was on a dream mission. He was trying to get into Harry's dreams. I kept doing my regular shifts, but the tower felt different to me now. Knowing Edward's story, I could feel history around every corner. I didn't talk to the other guards about it. They would look at me like I was crazy. They'd call it the first night hallucination. But I knew Edward was real, very real. On the third night, Edward returned. He looked very tired, but also excited. I did it, he said. I reached Harry. How did he react? At first he was shocked. He thought it was a dream. But then he listened, because Harry has a pure heart. He stands up against injustice. What did you tell him? Everything. How we were killed, where we were buried, Richard III's crimes, and where the evidence is. Evidence? What evidence? Edward smiled. My Uncle Richard was a very meticulous man. He kept records of everything, secret documents, letters, plans. He kept them all in his secret rooms. Are those documents still there? Yes, in very deep, very secret places. But if Harry comes, I can show them to him.
Is Harry coming? He is, soon, because I showed him evidence in his dream. I showed him the secret parts of the power. Now he wants to know the truth. Edward was right. A week later, an official announcement was made. Prince Harry would be visiting the Tower of London for historical research. Special permits had been obtained. It would be a night visit. Jim Harwick called me. Marcus, there's a very special visit tonight. Prince Harry is coming. You'll be accompanying him. Me? Why? You know your history. You know the Bloody Tower very well. The prince is particularly interested in the story of the little princes. If only Jim had known. At 9 o'clock, Harry and his small team arrived. There were 2 security guards, a historian, and a secretary for official records with him. Harry was warmer and more natural than expected. Harry, right? He said, shaking my hand. I hear you're the young expert on the tower. Yes, sir. I'd be happy to assist you. I have a special interest in the Bloody Tower. The story of the little princes has always intrigued me.
While the team was getting ready, I took Harry to the Bloody Tower. I could sense Edward nearby, but he wasn't visible yet. "Marcus," Harry said in the little prince's room, "there's a strange energy here. Do you feel it?" "What kind of energy?" "It's as if someone is here with us, as if from the past." At that moment, Edward appeared. Slowly, his transparent figure became clearer, but only Harry and I could see him. Harry's breath caught. You... "Edward," the prince said in a calm voice. "Edward, Prince Edward, we met in your dreams." Harry's team couldn't see anything. For them, there was only Harry, me, and the old walls in the room. "This is real," Harry whispered. "You're really here." "I've been here for 500 years, and I need your help."
Harry gave his team a break. "I want to be alone for a while," he said, "to get a better feel for the atmosphere." After they left, Edward, Harry, and I went down to the basement where the secret passages were located. "There are secret rooms behind this wall," Edward said. "My Uncle Richard's private rooms. The documents are there." Harry looked closely at the wall. "How do we open it?" he asked. Edward pointed to certain stones. "In this order, the third stone, the seventh stone, the fifth stone, then the top cornerstone." Harry carefully followed Edward's instructions. Each time he pressed a stone, there was a faint clicking sound. When he pressed the last stone, the wall began to tremble. "Goodness," said Harry. Slowly, a hidden door opened. Old damp air came from inside. We lit our torches and went inside. The first room was small and empty, but as we went further, larger rooms appeared, and in those rooms there were chests, very old wooden chests. Edward pointed to a specific chest. "Over there. The letters and documents are in there." Harry opened the chest. Inside were old parchments, sealed envelopes, and documents written on parchment paper. These are Richard III's handwriting," Harry said, examining the documents carefully. "What does it say?" I asked. Harry was reading in Latin. "Here, it says, 'The princes are a threat. They must be eliminated. It is necessary for the security of the throne.' And the date, August 12, 1483. Tears glistened in Edward's eyes. Finally, written proof. Harry examined other documents. "There are more detailed plans here. How the murder will be carried out. How the bodies will be hidden. Everything is here." "Is there a location for our bodies?" asked Edward. "Yes," said Harry. "There's a map here. A map of the secret rooms under the tower. And the marked locations, these are the places where the bodies were buried." Edward began to glow, a glow of happiness. "All these years, this is what I've been waiting for." "So, what do we do now?" I asked. Harry looked determined. "We'll make these documents public, and we'll find the bodies. We'll verify their identities using modern technology." "Is that possible?" "Of course. DNA tests, radiocarbon dating, forensic analysis. We can do it all." Edward turned to Harry. "Thank you so much. The justice I've waited 500 years for will finally come."
"It's not over yet," Harry said, "but I promise the truth will come out." That night, we retrieved many documents from the secret rooms. It was a complete criminal archive of Richard III. Not only the murder of the princes in the tower, but other crimes were also documented. "This will change history," Harry said. "Everything we know about Richard III will change completely."
The following months were very busy. Harry kept his word. The secret documents were examined by experts. They passed authenticity tests, and the results were shocking. The letters written in Richard III's handwriting confessing to the murder were completely real. Historical analysis, paper aging tests, ink analysis. Everything pointed to the year 1483. The media went wild. BBC, CNN, and all the world's channels reported the news. 500-year-old mystery solved. The killer of the little princes proven. But the real shock was the discovery of the bodies. With special permission granted to Harry, archaeological excavations began beneath the tower. Following Richard III's map, they reached the area where the secret chambers were located. And there they were found. 2 small skeletons. Age analysis showed that they had died at the ages of 12 and 9. DNA tests confirmed that they were Edward V and his brother Richard.
The funeral service held at Westminster Abbey was watched around the world. The 2 brothers were finally laid to rest in a manner befitting kings. Harry's speech at the service was very moving. Edward and Richard were not just historical figures, they were children. Innocent children. And justice, however late, has finally come to them. Edward visited me for the last time that day. He was very peaceful, very happy. "I'm leaving now, Marcus," he said. "Where to?" "To peace, with my brother. My mission is complete. I'll miss you, Edward. I'll miss you too. You ended my 500 years of loneliness. You were my friend." Edward smiled one last time. "Keep loving the tower, Marcus. This place is no longer just a home for dark stories, but also for hope." And he slowly faded away, in golden light, in peace.
2 years have passed since those days. The Tower of London is now a very different place. Edward's story has been added to the official tour route. The true story of the little princes is now being told. And I am no longer just a security guard. I have become an official tour guide. Every day I tell hundreds of visitors Edward's story, the true story, how he was killed, how he found justice, his courage, his determination. Harry began working worldwide on children's rights. He founded the Edward and Richard Foundation because, as he said, every child deserves justice. Every child deserves to be remembered. There is no longer a terrifying silence at the Tower of London. There is a peaceful silence. Edward and Richard have found peace, but their spirits are still here as hope. Sometimes, especially on nights when the moonlight illuminates the bloody tower, I hear the laughter of 2 children, Edward and Richard, finally together. Finally free. And every time I smile, because I know that justice, no matter how long it takes, always prevails. Edward taught me that. The truth never dies. It just waits for the right time to emerge.
Today, Edward's story is known around the world. Books have been written, movies have been made, documentaries have been produced. But for me, the most valuable thing is the peace I find every night at the tower. Children now come here without fear. They listen to Edward's story, the story of the brave little prince, and they find hope. Because Edward's story teaches us this: injustice can never prevail. Richard III's crimes are now known worldwide. History has been rewritten, and the memory of 2 innocent children will live on forever. Harry is still working for children's rights. He has established foundations and launched aid programs in Edward's name, because Edward's spirit has been an inspiration to him. I still work at the tower, but I am no longer just a guard. I am the guardian of Edward's story, the guardian of hope, the guardian of justice. And every night, looking at those old walls, I know death is not the end. Love is not the end. And most importantly, injustice is never the end. Edward proved it. It took 500 years, but he proved it. The truth never dies. It just waits for its time. Nothing was the same at the Tower of London after that night, but sometimes change is good, especially when you see a spirit that has been waiting for 500 years, finally finding peace. If you were there, would you have helped Edward in such a paranormal encounter? Would you want the dark secrets of history to be revealed? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more secret stories about the royal family.